Call to order the Berlin Finance Committee meeting. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded. Okay, let's do the first item of business. Let's get the minutes out of the way. So the minutes of 10/22. Julie wasn't present for those minutes, but the motion is to approve the minutes of 10/23. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion on that?
Did I do them?
Yes, you did,
Mhm.
Mary. Other than Julie.
Thank you very much.
Julie wasn't here for that, roll call, Scott,
Mary, I. Heidi, I.
Cliff, all right, Kathy Schwartz, 0. Now we'll do the minutes of 11/4. Julie and Cliff are not present for that meeting. This was the joint meeting with the select board. So the motion is to approve the minutes. Oh, you were present, actually. Heidi was not present. Right, there was only 3 of them. You were not there, were you there for the select board?
Mhm.
Oh, actually, we had to, but there was 4.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. It was just Julia was not present. Okay, so the motion is to approve the minutes of 11/4. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other comments or discussion on it? All right, Scott,
Mary, I. Heidi, I.
Cliff, aye. This way.
Yeah, sorry, I can't, I can barely hear you.
Good. All right, that's done. We should get to the main item of business here. So first up is the tentative budget from ASIDA. Okay, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to our folks that are online in the community. My name is Ernest Hool. I'm the Superintendent Director at Assabet Valley Regional Vocational School District. To my right is our Director of Business Operations, Maria Silva. It's a pleasure to once again be before you to present this year's FY26 tentative budget. We're here extra early this year by a couple of months, so this is really tentative based on numbers that we don't have even from the governor's office yet. But we're going to have our best crack at it, and we'll walk you through this. And then obviously we're always welcome to come back. Before I start, I will say our long-term serving committee member Lynn Ryan is under the weather, so she was unable to join us tonight. So we send her our best. In a nutshell, Berlin is seeing an increase of 7 students as of our October 1 numbers for 24. That's how all of the Chapter 70 funding is formulated. So that's 7 students for a total of 44, which this budget would be built on. The preliminary assessment, and we'll get into it in the slides, for Berlin is $762,601, and that's approximately $67,673 more than what the current FY25 budget is, and that indicates an operational share through enrollment of a 4.1% for Berlin. On the if you flip your page to the first slide there, you'll see in this FY26 fast facts kind of slide, we have a 7.2% increase in overall enrollment in the district. So we continue the trend of having all in-district freshman students coming in. We have an increase of 72 in-district students that came into the district as of October 1st, 24. What we're projecting is an 11.9% increase in Chapter 70 funding aid. That's based on a 3-year average percentage that Maria has determined, based on what the 3 previous years that the governor's budget had, or the final state budget. Based on that, the determination of minimum local contribution, again, based on a percentage, is an 8.3%. So you'll see those figures. Total increase realized for FY26 is a $2,280,646 budget increase. Page 1, and I will tell you as we go through this slide, we're going to jump. You'll see we'll jump page numbers. It's because we have some slides that we left out because we don't have actual figures because we're waiting on updated net school spending requirements and the governor's budget numbers and things of that nature. So when we come back in February, because I'm sure we'll be back, you'll see additional slides that have those numbers. The topics that are basically in this presentation are on page 1. Page 2, basically the overall budget overview, our operating budget this year, not including capital. That's the renovation project that we normally, you'll see down the bottom, budget, capital budget. 28,552,719. The 2,697,766 overall increase, and that's a 9.8% increase over our current FY25. The capital budget, as it always does each year, decreases by $55,000. And this year's capital budget, which is distributed between our 7-member communities, is at $1,702,875. That's a 10th debt service payment, and you'll see there is a debt service schedule. So you'll see how that drops. So our total FY26 budget, our tentative budget that we're proposing is a $30,255,594. Page 3 are the budget drivers that we have used to make the determination of this budget coming to proposal and fruition. I will say the committee did vote this budget tentatively last evening at their school committee meeting. Obviously, we'll have a public hearing in February on the 14th of February, I believe it is. No, that's wrong. That's it's actually on the 11th, I believe it is. But primarily, I'm not going to read all through them, but we have some strategic planning priorities, initiatives that we have, including diversifying our teachers and staff, long-term facility planning. We came to you last year with the stabilization fund that we have implemented. We're looking to build on that, but obviously, as we do long-term facility planning, we're then going to put a plan in to be able to use some of that funding in the future. And we also have the promotion of a safe and supportive school culture and school community for all students. We have some curricular gaps that we're seeing with the increasing numbers of multi-language learners that we have, students with disabilities. And we want to make sure we maximize our student impact for those students as the needs arise. In addition, all school districts are still dealing with social emotional learning and mental health. And our special education services. I think it's important to note that obviously Assabet inherits the students that come to them in 9th grade without an ability to have an influence in their education prior to 9th through 12th grade. So as you can imagine, sometimes students come to us and either have not been identified or we're unaware that they may have special ed services. So that's a bit of a kind of a
Catch up?
yeah, it's a catch up sometimes, or sometimes, you know, we may have parents that say, well, they were doing better. So we decided we weren't going to put them in as needing a 504 and IEP. And then after they have a few months at Assabet and their grades are starting to slide or they're having difficulties, we then find out like, oh, well, they did have it up until, mid 8th grade year. And we decided to kind of roll it back. And then those are services then that we then have to incur and to make sure we address as appropriate through the IDA, federal IDA. And then obviously in running a career technical program, the cost of supplies to run our technical programs, copper, steel, all those consumables, which we do get the chance to use over and over as much as we can. But then at some point they become scrap steel and, they can't be used any longer. So those are things that are kind of driving this FY26 budget. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Maria to kind of walk us through the next few slides.
All right. So as Ernie mentioned in his opening, Berlin has 7 additional students from FY25 to 26 really for the budget purposes, which is an increase of 18.92%. Oh, I know I speak very.
It's probably not even, it's not on the.
Sorry. If you go to the next slide is just a statutory method of assessment, just kind of explains how that works, the way the minimum local contribution is calculated by the Department of Ed. Again, we will receive those numbers around the third week of January, which will be more concrete. What you have before you is just projections based on prior data, no real numbers, and our budget's mostly driven by Chapter 70 and assessments, the MLC portion, which is given to us by the Department of Ed. So I'll have those numbers by the middle of, or the third week of January. Then our MLC transportation debt and OPEB slide,
Page 12.
page 12. You will see, again, this just brings back from doing the minimum local contribution based on the percentages average for Berlin over the last few years. And again, what I anticipated of a per pupil increase, not much. Again, I don't have those numbers. So you see Berlin's minimum local contribution projection or tentative budget is $642,492. The busing for our district has increased. We are going out to bid for a new contract as it expires in June of this year. Over the last 3 years, we have taken in a lot more, like you see this year, 72 more in-district kids, which means our capacity has increased of having to transport our students from our sending communities to our district. So over the last few years, it's been well over 100 students. Right now, because we're still within the contract, we haven't added buses. We still have the same number of buses we had 5 years ago. However, we've created tiers in order to reduce the number of students on the bus in the morning and in the afternoon. So we've created tiers in the morning. So the same bus will do a couple of pickups. And then in the afternoon during sports season, it alleviates the afternoon route because, we got about 400 students playing sports, which is helpful. But as soon as sports is over, the bus capacity gets very heavy. So that's been our solution, working with the principal, the superintendent, myself, and our bus company in order to alleviate, the liability that we'll have and the bus company will have by overcrowding the bus. So our bus contract, like I said, will be going out in January. We anticipate increasing our buses by at least 3 buses. So right now we have 18 buses and we're looking to possibly go to 21 buses. Our per bus cost will also increase based on what the contracts have been within our sending communities and their contracts. We haven't done this since 2020. It was COVID year and, a lot has changed since then.
Just a quick note on the busing. I will share that one of our communities, Hudson, recently had their bus contract and it was increased by 50%. And unfortunately, what's happened in the realm of busing is that you're only getting one bidder. And so there's no competition. So in the past, the last time we did this contract, we at least had 2. And what they did, or in the past, we've seen sometimes they'll split the to and from school, and then all the extracurricular activity buses are done by a different contractor. Last time, this current bus contract, it actually switched. So it can be challenging. It's nice when you have 2 bus contractors that do that, depending upon how you put the RFP out, because as you know, the other issue with busing is that this is shortage of drivers. If somebody's out or sick, and then all of a sudden now you've got a new person driving the bus. Sometimes the bus routes get done backwards. So kids that are outstanding at the bus at 6:30 and are getting picked up till 7:30. And by that time, the parents are driving the kids to school saying, hey, my kid missed the bus or it never showed up. But it was actually coming, they just passed it on the way. So a bit of a challenge when it comes to busing, so.
A quick question. Are you seeing just less bus companies available or are they merging and why are there less bids?
Yeah, no, you know what? I think it's a phenomenon in Mass. There's a large bus company called NRT. We also have First Student. And for some reason, they have their territories carved out and don't cross territories. And They don't work on state bid lists, type from that standpoint. You know, we've tried to work with the state and the Department of Ed to say, hey, we need some assistance here because school districts are really getting clobbered with the amount of increase in bus costs. So it's just, yeah, we, every time we get an inquiry about, hey, we're interested in maybe a bid, I forward it so we have their name so we can send them the bid list. We've gotten a few from Rhode Island, New York, but I don't think that they're established enough here. If they're only coming for Assabet, you know, you're talking 18 buses. Are they gonna put a huge fleet just for 18 buses for us? Where they're looking for multiple districts, so I don't have a good answer for that, but that was a long-winded one. All right, sorry to interrupt.
And in my experience, I've seen that this particular bus company, the first year, they bid pretty low to be competitive. And then it increases over the next few years. So we'll see what happens this time around. So then the next item is our OPEB trust, which we are set at 100,000, and your portion again is a 4.1%. And then our capital improvement stabilization fund, which is at 250, which is the same as last year. Again, your portion is 4.1%, which is $10,129. So and then our long-term debt, which is the bond, the capital project, your portion is $62,155. So your overall assessment for FY26 tentatively is $762,601. So you have 44 students from within your district. Do you guys have any questions? That's I'm like, I try not to be super finance and just give numbers, so I try to pause and wait for questions.
I appreciate that.
Cause I can go really crazy with the numbers. Okay, so the next slide just shows that your assessments go down every year by 55,000. Berlin's percentage is a 3-year average that was set back when the bond was set, so that number will never change. That 3.65. You can have 10,000 students come to the school or 10 students come to the school. We'll never have 10,000, but you know, that number, that percentage will never change. It won't shift. So right now you guys are at 4.1%, but your percentage for the capital project is still at 3.65. The next page shows the schedule, the debt schedule, until we've paid it off in 2041. Sounds like a far away. And then we have the next slide is our revenue plan. So our revenue plan consists of our chapter 70, again, tentative projected numbers based on formulas. We're looking to see an increase overall of 1.1%, 1.1 million. And then Berlin's assessment will increase by $44,583. That's just for the minimum local contribution. I think what's important to understand or know is that I don't have these numbers just yet, but these numbers go through the governor, through the state, through the House until the very end is July. By law, every community has to pay their minimum local contribution. So if DESE changes those numbers in July, we will reassess like we did this year. I mean, this year went up $123, which wasn't a huge amount, but you know, it can vary. And I don't know that number until the end of July. Usually around July 25th is when I'm looking for that number. And then at our August meeting with school committee, we give them the new minimum local contribution amounts that are required by the Department of Ed. And then we reassess the cities and towns accordingly.
And just a quick side note, as we do every year, this is again at a net school spending minimum budget. So we're right at what the department requires us to be at for Assabet. So that additional 123, you know, we've had some towns communities reach out to us and say, hey, this wasn't what you had given us for a number. And this is above what you are claiming is your minimum, you know, your net school spending amount. But it's actually what the state's requiring. So the difficulty is if a community says, oh, well, we're not going to pay that additional $123 is what you said, right? The state would come back and then say, well, you can't set your tax rate for the next year, right? So it's not like it's Assabet's choice to go ahead and add that last minimum local contribution, but that's at the final component of the budgeting process, right? When both the House Committee and the Senate Committee, Conference Committee come together and then give it to the governor for final approval. That's when all those numbers finally wash out, right? And then whatever's given to us a minimum local contribution, it's not like we added the money just randomly to the budget. So I just wanted to make sure I explained that because sometimes on committees, we have new folks. You guys have relatively been recent, so you know the process. But if we're getting our spiel down, this is our first crack at it. So I'm making sure we're thorough as usual.
We're happy to give you a dress rehearsal.
What's that?
We're happy to give you a dress rehearsal.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Excellent.
That's important.
Thank you.
So next you have, other revenues that we anticipate, using. 400,000 from E&D, which is like our free cash, that we're allowed to use. Our interest income, we invest our unused cash in our MMDT, so we're able to maximize, how much interest we get on cash that we aren't currently using month by month, warrant by warrant. And then our Medicaid reimbursement that comes directly to the district, which is totals around 625,000. That's added revenue from the district's portion. Our regional transportation reimbursement we have not received that number either. I've left it exactly what it was this current year. Again, I'll get that number at some point and it will change. And then Berlin's portion of their OPEB busing capital assessment and capital stabilization is 120,000, which brings us down to the final budget of 30,255,500. 594 dollars. The last slide, do you guys have any questions on that? The last slide is our expenses. I mean, in a nutshell, the biggest increases we're seeing within this budget is the busing that we have to bring in due to the increases in student population. We also have brought in money, expenses that we were paying out of our out-of-district tuition, and because we have so much more in-district students, that money is disappearing on the out-of-district side of the house. So we have to bring that expense over. 1.4 million is for health insurance that we currently this year are paying out of out-of-district, but we can't continue carrying it there. So we have to shift it back in here, as well as our electricity bill, which a portion of it was being paid from out of district. So those, and then we're in the middle, and Ernie will probably speak to this a little more. We're in the middle of, well, we're at the beginning stages of negotiations. Our contract is up June 30th. So we don't know what, the percentages COLA is going to be, if, what percentages are going to happen within our negotiations. So I've kind of pulled together some money so that, kind of projecting what we may expect. But what's built into the budget is what we already have contractually, which is at the end of June, 0.75% increase for the teachers, and then the step increases. So that's a pretty big number, just those two. So that's built into the budget currently without knowing what the COLA increase will be for the next school year.
Go ahead.
I just want to clarify is that, make sure I understand correctly. So under the insurance of active employees, it shows the increase going from 842,000 to 2.4 million. It's because you don't have the out-of-district students' revenue to offset this previously,
Right.
which is kind of under the covers, everything you'll see at the top
Correct.
line number.
Right.
Because we're now taking more and more in-district students.
Yeah.
Is there any, I was looking at it as like, what are we down to for out-of-district
Out of
students?
district, we have 74,
You have a total of 70.
total of 74.
And they're almost all in what, grade 11 and 12?
Well, no,
Yep.
yeah.
11,
So historically, what it was when I started, we had over 300 out of district students. So when I started and presented one of my first budgets, we would, in the revenue plan, we allotted 5.5 million that would offset member assessment. And what had happened was although folks thought that that was offsetting the assessment to the member towns, you were still paying what was required by the state for minimum local contribution. But because a third of the population was from out of district, you weren't bearing the cost for that. You weren't bearing the cost for transportation services because the sending communities would be on the hook to pay their own and would schedule their own transportation. We would then be busing only 900 students. Actually, we weren't even at this capacity, but a third of it now would be, we're pretty close to, 1,200 students. And now you're bearing 1,130 of those students, right? We're 1,128, where the sending schools are only handling 72. So that's a huge difference, right? Because as you see in the revenue plan, if you would have flipped back a page, there's no out-of-district revenue being applied to this budget. So as we mentioned last year, we've got a couple of years. So this is we probably have one more year in which we have this kind of big swing and a higher percentage that's happening until it all levels out, which I would say in probably FY28 when we come back. It won't be such, huge percentage because you won't be having 72 kids, join the district. And if you do have any out of district kids that are here, I'm guessing it's going to be between 15 to 20. And that's probably because students have either moved out of district. We had a freshman, as a matter of fact, that was in district, came in, started the year, over the course of the fall, ended up moving out of district, went to a community that didn't have or was not part of the Assabet district, but then the district that they were going to be going to was full and couldn't take anybody. So then that particular sending district, and we had already used the spot, so they allowed and signed up for that student to come. So those scenarios are one-offs. They don't always happen. But usually we don't have any out of district. Maybe in the sophomore year it would happen. But it's difficult because in the sophomore year, the students don't have the same ability to look at all 16 programs. They're only looking at what availability is left with open technical programs. So you might have a student that comes in and only has 3 choices to pick, right? So, and if it's not one of their 3, then they're not going to come. So
I'm assuming now that you're probably having students that you're rejecting because now you don't.
yeah, so last,
At least in district.
yeah, so we take about we usually take about 300 students is what we earmark. But if we see that in the junior class we have potentially less than 300, we sometimes will backfill. So this particular year we had 312 freshmen that we accepted because we had some spots in the junior. So really, if you look at it, we do it by format. When you're thinking about scheduling, it's usually 600 per format. Juniors and freshmen and juniors, 600 students total, and then seniors and sophomores, 600. So we backfilled and had 312. However, we had 458 students apply in district. And then we had another 120 or so out of district. So we have 300 spots and we're getting close to 600, 550 to 600 applications per year. So yeah, we do, most of the time, if the students meet the criteria, they're put on a wait list. And then they're kept on that wait list. The one thing I will tell you is, as much as I love to say that everybody wants to come to Assabet, sometimes we're one of a number of school choices that they're looking at besides staying in their sending community. They might be looking at a private school or St. John's. They might be looking at AMSA. They might be looking at, the preparatory, the sports type school. And then they apply to Assabet as well. But then if they get accepted to multiple, right, we then get a call that says, hey, I know I got accepted, but we're gonna get a decline. So what happens is that person gets pulled off. We go to the next person down the list. So the other thing I would just mention, as Maria mentioned about negotiations, we're just starting. We're actually starting next week with our teachers and then our support staff. That's for their contractual negotiations. We also don't have any, as much as we have numbers in here for health insurance, we have no concrete numbers for health insurance yet. We don't anticipate those. I'm hoping by February when we come back, we'll have some hard numbers, but even that, we had an insurance meeting today. They're saying that might be a bit of a push. If we request early enrollment or renewal numbers too early, they tend to make hypotheticals, and the percentages may not be as good if we can wait a little bit longer. So I'm hoping that maybe by February, but March, we may not have that number till. And that's for health insurance. And right now, what I'm hearing, just to give you a heads up, is somewhere in the 10% and above, in some cases. We've been lucky, senior plan, which are retirees, were in the single digits this past year. So, which is good. That means we have healthy people. So,
Right now, your number that is flat, from the projections in here, or are you throwing in that?
no, there's a percentage that she's included, but it's, it's a conservative percentage.
What conservative percentage?
I did 6%.
6%.
I was hopeful.
Is it fair for me to think that, and maybe I have misunderstood, so that's why I'm asking this question. Is it fair for me to think that in the next couple of years, be all in District 3?
Yes.
I want to make sure I heard that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only way that would potentially change is if we had an ability to maybe expand. But, in the ability to expand, we still have another 150 kids on the wait list from a district, right? So you'd have to expand pretty big. And at this point, I don't think any of our communities have the appetite for adding an additional bond to our capital. So we'd have to have either creative ways or grant type process to have that happen. So. Let's see, and I think that's it. The last slide is just as we wrap up, just kind of the timeline that we follow. Obviously, our regional agreement calls for our committee to make a tentative vote on a budget in December. We kind of follow the old state guidelines when they used to run, right? The July to June fiscal year until when they switched to January to December. Our regional agreement didn't change, so we do it awfully early. For Maria, who's, originally from Greater Lawrence, which was her alma mater, the technical school, she's not usually presenting a budget until like March. So this is very early for her, even though it's her third crack at it. So, but this is our schedule. Obviously, December, we're here. They have the budget discussions and they vote the tentative governor's budget, and then final budget and public hearing for us happens in February. So. And then we're on the budget circuit. So, any other questions? I will add, I think before I get done, in case you have, that's why you're thinking, we are in the process of starting the renovation project of the second floor of this building with our students here from Assabet. And Wayne Colson is our project lead on that. And I know he's been working with the town officials and the DPW to get that project going. And within, I think when they come back in January, they'll be at full bore. They're putting a set of temporary stairs up and putting a new door in the back there so they don't have to traipse through your lovely atrium entryway every day and having to sweep and clean those floors up. So I think you'll be impressed once the kids come. I think if folks encountered them when they were in Southborough last year at the senior center, this year, I've heard at the ribbon cutting that the seniors were kind of disappointed that they wouldn't have that connection to young people. That some of them, because of the way, just life is structured now, they don't get that opportunity to engage. And they always looked forward to it while the students were working in Southborough. So hopefully you'll have that same opportunity here. My hope is that our design and visual instructor, Bill May, who did a HGTV style program of that project. And they named it Nailing It. And it was about all of our technical programs in the school, but they really focused on carpentry, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, painting and design, who basically did a time lapse of that entire project. I'm hoping they'll do the same thing here. So that way we can showcase what they're doing here.
Are they putting this on YouTube?
They have a YouTube channel, yeah. It's I believe it's Assabet TV, and we can get you that. I'll send that link out so they can give it to you. But they've done a great job, and it is in the style of an HGTV or what's it, Chip and Joanna Gaines, right?
Yeah.
How they do that. So the kids are even singing in one of the episodes because so it's actually
Well,
pretty good.
I can tell you, because I also sit on Capitol, and that this project has been an amazing opportunity for us as well, because this was a construction project that the town needed to do, had been looking into for several years. And even with the money that we had gotten through the ARPA funds,
Hmm.
it turned out that what they thought would have been like under 500K was approaching close to, what was it?
I think it was, I heard- I think it was 1.8.
million.
Yeah,
what I heard.
and kept going up. And so to be able to have Alphabet come in and see, you know, all our students
Yeah.
working is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it builds, you know, for students, right, and they're gaining their education and their skill set. I know that Heidi's a product of vocational ed as well, and I'm a welder by trade, and Maria was electronics. You know, it's one of the things that I think in education, it gives the students the ability to have pride in their community and be able to give back, even if it's not students that are from just Berlin. They understand what kind of impact they have in saving dollars and having an impact on, especially in this building, because it will be for, you know, police and fire and things of that nature. So we're happy to help, and I'm just glad there was another project in Berlin that was, you know, it actually, Wayne's very happy because it gets them out of the cold with the kids instead of being on some outside project at that time of year. So
So,
Sure.
Maria, I have one little question for you. On that slide 16 that shows the operational revenue plan.
Yes.
You told us and you went fast and I was like, what did she say? So towards the bottom, there's an asterisk member community assessments. That's, you said OPEB and then what else?
Oh, so it's actually on the slide, number 12,
Ah,
and that's really what it is.
okay, so
So it's
so I
the,
wasn't paying
basically
attention
what's in
earlier.
yellow.
yeah, what's in yellow is what you see on the bottom piece. Yeah.
Ah,
that's it.
okay, okay,
So what's
I
in
see.
yellow is what you see in the bottom.
yeah.
What's in
okay.
yellow plus the gray. So it's the gray and the yellow is what total the bottom half of that.
Thank you.
So it's, sorry, I know.
No, that's,
That's why I say I'm very just finance numbers. Better slow it down.
And obviously, when we come back in February, we'll have that nice looking budget book that we put together that has other information that,
Mhm.
you know, we don't have for you tonight, but this is the bare bones.
oh, this is terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Ernie, before you go,
Sure.
our town administrator who's not here would like to say something. So Kristen, if you want to take yourself off mute, you're ready to roll.
Excellent.
I am here. Can you hear me? No, not so much.
No one can go right.
That's usually not a problem that I have.
There, she's talking, her mic's unmuted, but I can't hear her.
How about now?
Kristen,
Try now?
All right. Can you hear me now?
Nope.
I can see you talking, but I'm not hearing.
I feel like I'm on that old school Verizon commercial.
You're still talking and we can't hear.
Let me try one more.
If you click on her,
Can you unmute her?
Okay, no worries.
Unmuted, she's
Not a big deal.
on video.
Race tag, not a big deal.
She should be talking through a mic.
Anyway, you can hear me now?
Well,
She
wanted
wanted to thank you, that's at least
part of what I
what I
saw.
thought.
in
Okay.
text,
Okay.
No, that's all right. No big deal.
but
I'm not sure
what else
if
she
you wanted to say.
I'm gonna say the suspense is killing me.
It's
It's not often that I'm in suspense, but
Pressure to find it.
yeah.
No, that just means she's gonna have to call you.
That's okay.
There you
That's
go.
okay. No, well, we have, you know, again, I appreciate, we always have, we've had a great relationship with Berlin and all of our communities. And like I said, anytime we can help or other things, you know, I know in the past, like I mentioned, we've had our painting and design students, you know, refresh the senior living area in your apartments there and all the common areas a couple of years back. And any way that we can showcase and have folks see how education has, their educational dollars have an impact with the kids and we can give back. It's a great to do.
So
In the chat before you go,
she
she
said, I
said,
want to thank you and Wayne for all of your work on the project. Wayne has been fantastic to work with and we are excited about the project and the partnership.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Thank
Tell her
you.
Thank
ditto.
you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Have a good holiday.
Hey, you
Yeah,
too.
you too.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon.
Cool.
I know it's a setting on top. That's what Brittany was saying, but I don't know what setting it was
Good to see you.
or what
The,
with the audio.
Did you get your electrical thing all fixed?
well, no, because that was
We put these
one buses into your bags, right? Gas. If I can email you tomorrow or something.
Let's go, yeah.
Sorry,
we needed to try to do a little collaborating. No,
I remember.
Strike while the iron's hot.
Can you just give me
Sure.
your full names and titles so I can put in the minute? Thanks.
I just feel bad. We left early. The concert at Tohoto today. The middle school
Oh.
chorus was there and the performance was there. They were doing an incredible job. But
Awesome.
I wanted to make sure I wasn't late for you guys
Wow.
at 7:45. so,
That way.
Yep. I had to
This
make sure I-
way, we'll all be.
Great.
Good.
You have any extra copies of that?
Here we go.
Thank you.
Appreciate
it.
Thank you.
Some more here, Al.
Anyone else?
They'll share
Oh,
it. Make them share.
Make them share.
Appreciate it.
Everyone has them?
Mhm.
Give them his own.
Back that way,
Oh, that's just right there, no.
you know. I didn't hear anything.
I was gonna say it's you, Sue. I know it's you.
Good evening. How's everybody?
Good,
Good.
Al.
So she's ready. How are you? How you doing?
I'm sorry, can you?
Thank you for
can you
this,
just
by the way.
Fill in the sheet and.
Yep, I will.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep.
Sorry, let's do that first.
I know we don't have. Real quickly, but at least with our first names, I'm Scott.
I'm Cliff.
I'm Julie.
Mary Porter. Heidi.
Al Gann, Superintendent of Schools with Berlin-Boylston, and I think I met most of you before. And this is Aaron Osborne, our new Director of Finance and Operations for Berlin-Boylston. So I know before you had, when we came our first time meeting you, it was with Dan Didi, who's the interim, and Aaron is officially on board as our new Director of Finance and Operations. So thank you guys for inviting us here tonight. Like I said, we had a busy day, but we just left Tohoto, where we were watching the middle school chorus and band perform. So it was a nice event there. So we sort of snuck out early to make sure we're here on time. So our first meeting with a lot of you, I know we had a really early one that we sort of did an introduction. And this is our chance to really just have a conversation with you, and similar to what Assabet just said, this is really preliminary. And this is the way Aaron and I might be new to your district in Berlin-Boylston, which is really now our district. But we've worked together before in Hamden, Wilbraham, as a superintendent and director of finance and operations as well too. So this is the format that we have done in the past, and that we feel is a good way to present our budget to the communities. We met with Boylston on Monday. And so today we're just trying to figure out, it's been a busy week, and obviously we're here tonight as well too. Yes, we did. Yeah. And select board as well too. And select board. Yes, it was a joint meeting that we met with them as well. So this has been a week that we've sort of just got everyone together. The one thing we'll ask you at the end when we're done, and Aaron will do the presentation, if this is a format that's you're not comfortable with, or something you look a little bit different from us, like I said, this is our first time, just let us know and we'll go from there. Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
Aaron, you want to start?
So, first thing to say, I think some of our concerns are similar to Assabet's concerns. We are going into a bus contract rebid again, so I wasn't aware of the 50% concern that they shared. So we have a very different number. I want to start by just making it clear that, what we're presenting here is based on a lot of unknown information. So, for example, fiscal 25 state figures won't come out until the end of January. So I am using prior year's chapter 70 and chapter 71. Chapter 71, which is regional transportation need, can fluctuate from year to year. It really depends on what the legislature votes in the end. Usually the governor puts in a low number. There's some disagreement among the various legislators and some fighting to get the number lifted. So I usually start with whatever last year's number was. Safe bet. Chapter 70 really has a lot to do with student counts. It can, I've seen it range. I've been largely in minimum aid districts, so I'm not predicting growth yet in Chapter 70. I could probably put in a minimum growth figure that would be 0.5% to be safe. I just don't want to commit to that yet. So again, once we start talking in February, those numbers will certainly improve, I hope, a little bit. Data to compute the fiscal 26 assessments. You guys may recall from your regional agreement, a fairly complex assessment formula. That relies on some numbers that haven't been finalized yet. So we're working on getting those numbers and finalizing those figures. Another reminder is there's the April 1st deadline for out-of-district placements. I think something that vocational districts, don't have to deal with, but it's a reality of most public school districts that anytime before April 1st, we could get a very high cost out-of-district placement or very, very high cost special education student and be on the hook for paying for those services. After April 1st, the sending district pays for that next budget year, and then you pick them up the following year. It's just in recognition of the fact that budgets are set by April 1st usually. So I like to put that caveat in. I have given a budget presentation on, I believe it was March 25th. And that morning, without my knowledge, we had an extremely high cost special education student, out of district student move in. So I just like to have that caveat because it can be a little scary, right? One of the things you will see I've done is I have arranged our district budget into proper cost centers. In fund accounting, you typically have cost centers. So each of the schools is a cost center and the central office is a cost center. At the end of the day, we will be assessing the central office cost center in accordance with the way it's always been assessed. So nothing's changing in terms of the assessment model. It's more of a visual. It also allows us, we have had 3 account numbers for every single central office item and had to manually split things. It will save a lot of manual time in doing that. So the splits will be through the assessment, but it's exactly the same functionality. And then finally, you will see in our capital, as has been the case for a number of years, the need for student and staff devices. This is just a recommendation for me. I would, sort of recommend the communities. This will be a recurring capital item every single year. It may be worth considering if you're interested, moving that into the operating side of the budget. We can have some conversations about that, about what those numbers mean. If we know it's coming every year, we can plan a little more effectively for those costs and the device use.
I thought that was determined, whether it's capital or not, was determined by how it was written in the regional agreement. Was it like a 5,000?
Oh, that's per, so I believe that would be like a per unit kind of situation.
Yeah, but I'm just
right?
wondering how much of that was deciding where to put it was actually came under the regional agreement and not necessarily.
We can have that, and exactly, I think we can have that conversation. I would also, I guess, argue that we spend, on occasion, $30,000 or more on curriculum, right? And each book is $100 or whatever. Would that be a capital item? So,
but if it's a recurring, but the thing is,
Right.
you're being very logical. You're
Yeah.
saying it's a recurring cost you're going to have every year.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be treating it as a.
right. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to address it from a logical standpoint.
Yeah.
If it could go either way, you could decide to do it, Boyle could decide not to. Obviously, the Honto shared, so we need some agreement on that.
Mhm.
But I'm just throwing it out there because it is something you are going to see.
One of the things we don't have in place and we're working on right now, and we actually even in school committee last night, the subcommittee as well, is a tech plan. So we don't have a full year full 3 to 5 year plan for technology, what we're doing, what formats we're using, what devices we're using. We have most of our students on Chromebooks, but then we have some of our teachers are on different devices. So we really need to take a look at that. And that's something that we're really going to be working on this year. And at least we'll have a plan in place and then be able to implement, and that will help us with this decision as well too. We're ordering and buying Chromebooks and things, but we need to know what the lifespan of those are, which we know is 1 to 3 years. So there's a big piece of that, so we're still looking at.
We are also working on a 10-year capital plan,
Yep.
so something the district hasn't had in the past. We are going to try to build something out that goes 10 years, so you can kind of see what things look like in the future. That is in its infancy, but as that is developed, we will share that with the towns. I have it built into a Google spreadsheet, so it's very shareable. I'd be happy to give visibility to people. Once we get that going, it's not quite there yet.
They say, Aaron, back on the central office costs, you said it would be allocated out. You say 3 ways?
Yes.
Is it, so it allocated by school, the central office?
Yes, so
Okay.
Berlin, Boylston, and then Tohoto.
Right.
Yep.
So the usual percentages would then apply for Tohoto and other ones.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
And you just roll the whole thing up.
Exactly. It's highly academic.
Well, it
It's
makes
just-
sense.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah. And efficiency wise, I'm really getting hand cramp from writing 3 separate account numbers on things.
I
often.
didn't realize that it was set up that way. I was kind of appalled when you told me.
It's a very odd way of, so it goes back to when you were a union, right, underneath a region. So you really had 3 separate legal entities. You had to
Yes.
keep it separate.
Yeah.
Yes.
But at this point, but you were still allocating it 3 ways according to, you know, the process. So it doesn't really matter whether you allocate it in the assessments or and then charge it. It'll still be charged according to that process.
Just much more efficient.
I'm just, it's the regional agreement, that
Mhm.
the 5,000 that Julie was, it's about building repairs. So I think
Yeah.
I don't think the regional agreement says anything about the
Right.
dollar figure on.
I didn't think it did.
Well, actually,
Sure.
he's bringing up a good point, though. I mean, I'm glad you're bringing it up now because for our town, we have a capital planning committee. And so for things that fall under capital planning, we have other funds that we can use, but you
Yeah.
have to go through capital planning.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about this tech and it's not really covered by capital planning.
Mhm.
And that means you don't have, it's like, I'm just trying to figure out, do we have any town methodology restriction that would come back and say, oh, you had to do it under capital? When it makes more sense, the way you're describing it, that you would have a line item.
Julie, don't ask me why I know this, but 10,000 is the dollar figure that
Well, that's how.
the non-recurring.
Finish that statement
10,000.
about the 10,000. Sorry about that.
Non-recurring,
There is
so
a
it's
10,000.
a one-up cost, at least 10,000.
Gotcha.
That's, but I don't know why I say that.
No,
don't know if
that's
it's in our guidelines or-
that's our.
I want to say it's there. I'm
Yeah.
still learning the regional
Yeah.
agreement, so
Yeah.
apologies if I don't have it
Fine.
memorized, but I do believe there's a 10,000
see.
caveat in there.
No, Berlin is 10.
Yeah.
But Berlin capital is
for the-
10.
Or Berlin Capital is 10.
Capital
Yeah.
planning,
Yeah.
that's one of
That
our.
was the message we got.
But as I said,
That's
it's,
the-
I think what you're presenting is a good idea, but we may have to just make sure all the ducks are in a row
Sure.
to go that way.
I think
Completely
this
agree.
is okay, because it talks about building repairs with the 5,000. Doesn't generally talk about.
So let
5,000.
us finish.
I'm-
We'll
I'm
go.
sorry.
That's okay. No, no, it's all good. Let us just get.
Yeah,
go
I
for
just
this.
want to be
Sorry.
clear,
And
it's just a proposal / suggestion. I don't have any skin in the game in it one way or the other.
Yep.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking it might be easier for everyone involved.
And-
To
and this
think
is-
about that as an option.
And this is so preliminary we're working on, right? So a little over 3 months for me, a little over, I think, 3 weeks or 4 weeks for Aaron. So we're
Yeah.
really working it all out.
Maybe
uh,
5.
Maybe 5 weeks. Sorry about that. Sorry. Yes. So we're really trying to understand it all and work it all out and moving forward. But we really think this is the way in the direction we want to go in right now. And that's why we're presenting it this way to you guys.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yep.
Mhm.
Sure. So I thought I'd lead in by just talking about some of the universal budget drivers that are really impacting, you know, all 3 schools right now. Health insurance, we had our retiree health insurance come in this year at 17.89% increase. You know, I base my my predictions on the principle that the best predictor of the future is the past. That is the best past number I have. So at the moment, I am projecting 18% for health insurance. we will, I'm actually meeting with our insurance reps tomorrow. They may not have better information tomorrow, but I'm expecting we will get rates in the late January, early February timeline. That's pretty typical when we get rates. So I'm hoping to have better. We are beginning the contract negotiations with our teachers, just like Assabet. I think I want to make sure that, everybody's been following the news, and Beverly and Marblehead recently closed a 12-day strike at a 16% increase over 3 years. That comes to 5.33% a year. And they have 6 weeks of paid parental leave that is separate from their normal sick leave. So, those are some pretty big numbers. I have a placeholder in there. I'm not really at liberty to share what that is because we're going into negotiations, but there's a solid placeholder in there. Transportation, we are rebidding, and you may have seen me stop our friends from Assabet. They use the same contractor we do right now, and given the numbers of buses they have and we have, there may be some opportunity to collaborate on a bus bid, and at least increase our sort of density and make sure that if another vendor wants to come in, right, we have 8, they have 18, they're looking at 26 buses, which may be more attractive, right? So that's kind of a hope that, I think, and Maria mentioned in parting that she's looking for other districts possibly to create a larger pool. Previously, in a previous district I was in, we worked with the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and they put out a Franklin County bus bid. And that was pretty successful. It also saved just a lot of energy. You've got all these individual schools struggling to put out a comprehensive bus bid. And none of us is really a true expert in bus contracts. So we're doing the best we can often. We're taking a template from someone else and trying to make it work. So,
and we're looking at certain things. So it's not just the bus companies that are available, which is very limited, as they said earlier, but there's certain safety features we're also looking at. So not just driving our kids back and forth, but we're looking for efficiency as well too. And there are a lot of safety features that new bus companies are now coming with. So parents can track exactly where their kids are at all times and knowing where the bus routes are and the bus stops are. And we're making some moves here actually in Berlin. If you might have seen the school committee meeting last night, we even rerouting the routes, right? So we're making them much more efficient. So there are kids have an equity in terms of riding the bus, and there are some kids that aren't riding it just for 3 minutes, and some kids riding it for an hour. So that's a big move that we're making, and that'll be something we'll be looking for when we start our contract negotiation with bus companies. Like, give us the most efficient for our students, not what's the most efficient for the bus company around them as well too. So we'll be looking at all pieces of that, not just the financial piece.
Assabet Valley Collaborative, not vocational, is currently renegotiating their contract with Vanpool. That's for special education transportation. There have been apparently some challenges with that contract and Vanpool performing on the contract. There's some reporting and things like that that are essential for special education that hasn't been coming through, it seems. I am just getting up to speed on it, so bear with me if I don't have every single detail. But for the time being, I've put in a 10% placeholder on that, assuming that those numbers are going to go up to some degree. There'll be normal increases, but there might be, if there are additional requirements added onto that contract, we may need to consider. Other insurances, I think, I believe Assabet talked about the prices of materials. That goes directly into the cost of property insurance, auto insurance, things like that. You've also, I imagine, seen a lot of the storm damage in places like Florida. Insurance is a big pooled sort of service. So the insurance costs going on in Florida are impacting our rates. My experience the past 2 years at Hampton Wilbraham, where I was a 27% increase 1 year to property, and I want to say 13 the second. I believe I have 10% for property, auto, and liability insurance for now. The challenge is those rates usually don't come in until about May. So I'm going to try to talk to our representatives again at Maya tomorrow about insurance and see if I can sharpen that pencil. I want everyone to understand this is a process over the next couple of months of sharpening my pencil at every moment. And I don't want to come in here and present you a number that suddenly leaps upward, right? That's shocking. So you may have some shock in this moment, but my goal is to spare you the shock in late January or February when we may have to, if we under budget something, we may have to present you with a significant increase.
There's just so many still unknowns, right? So that's the stuff we're working on. And I know I heard the previous superintendent say it's early in the process for us. In all the years that Aaron and I have been doing this is really early for us this time of year as well, too. So everything we're giving you is sort of, preliminary, and we just want to make sure that's clear to that.
And the final item, and you'll definitely see it at Berlin Memorial, is we have a lot of agency hires. So those are staff who work for a contract agency. So they don't work directly for us, they work directly for the contract agency. We have had a very, very hard time filling in particularly paraprofessional positions. And so many of our paraprofessionals are mandated by IEPs. IEPs are legal contracts. We can't violate those. So we need to have the staffing available. So we often go to staffing agencies to fill some of those positions when we can't fill them. We do have a new paraprofessional contract that I think is substantially better than the prior. So in this year, we are hopeful that we will have more luck recruiting paraprofessionals this year. But right now, we probably pay twice as much for an agency paraprofessional as we do for a regularly hired paraprofessional. Now, we have some benefit costs for regular paraprofessionals, but it's still very significantly higher in cost. So we really need to look at that. We do have a couple other ancillary staff who are agency hires. They're the lower numbers, so it's a little less impactful, but it still impacts the budget to some degree.
We're really lucky that we have a para contract underway, right? So it was good that Mike Topman and his team did the work last year and have a contract in place for our paras. But back to what we're talking about in terms of contracted, our goal this year is to get as many people as we can off that contract and bring them in-house for us. We've had some people that are on contracts for over 3 years, right? And there's a substantial cost to that as well, too. So that's what we'll be working on. The answer to that, what we've seen in our careers is getting those jobs posted early. And that's the work that we'll be doing when spring rolls around to make sure we're out there with everybody else when those pools of jobs are out there, so we can grab them and get as many people as we can off contracts. There are times in the mid-year, right, when you're looking for a parent and someone comes into the district, like Aaron said, they have an IEP and they need a one-on-one or whatever that might be. That's sometimes when we have no choice, right? But year after year, we want to make sure that we're trying to bring those people in-house, especially now, like I said earlier, we have a para contract, and that's helpful to people too, right? When they're applying for these jobs, knowing like, okay, what's my cost going to be? What's my salary going to be? What are the protections I have? What are the insurance? It's all laid out in a para contract.
Do you have a rough sense of numbers you're willing to tell us on that?
So that is in the next slide. So there are 6 paraprofessionals at Berlin Memorial.
Okay.
And so that represents, if you figure each one is about $30,000 a year more than a regular paraprofessional, it's $180,000.
I'm familiar
right?
with this
And I go into the detail in the next slide. So I'll get into that. So this presentation starts at about a 30,000-foot view. We're going to drill down to maybe a 15,000-foot view. So we're looking at an overall operating budget for the entire district for next year of $26,449,485, a budget increase of a little over 1.6 million, and a net percent of 6.68% based on that. So getting down to the nitty-gritty, oops, on the next level, sorry. We have our budget by cost center, right? I mentioned to you that we're going to follow proper fund accounting procedures, and we're going to separate out the district as a cost center, the district-wide costs. You'll see those are at the top, representing a 2.75% increase. Most of what's in the central office is salaries, some supplies, a little transportation. We don't have the central office contracts. The people who are have independent contracts don't have columns and steps. So you don't start seeing those, the increases and things like that. And they're not subject to union negotiations and things like that. It also doesn't include some of the costs, the cost drivers that are the most significant in here. So that's some of the reason why that increase is not as high. Berlin Memorial, we are looking at a jump from 5,024,000 to 5,520,000, give or take. That's a 9.89% increase, and we'll get into the details on that in just a minute. So I'm sure you're going to have questions on that. We'll get into those drivers. Tohoto jumping up significantly as well from 11,987,000 to 12,932,000, with an increase of about 945,000, 7.89%. So again, we'll get into the drivers behind those. So getting right down into some of those drivers we talked about. As I said, we have some numbers in for salaries. Those salaries also include those agency hires. So if you follow the asterisk under the 26 budget down to the asterisk at the bottom, that salary item includes 180,000 in agency paraprofessionals. Otherwise, the net salary increase would be about 4.1%. Not terribly atypical when we do have a number of people who are moving up steps and occasionally moving across columns. I don't know how familiar you are with teacher salaries schedules, but there are a number of columns and a number of steps that they go up along the way. Employee health and retiree health. We pretty much know the retiree health will be that 18%. That's baked in. Employee health, that's again a placeholder just to assuage my own sort of anxiety over what that might end up being. I'm hopeful it will be less. I really do. It's a bigger pool of employees, or bigger pool of insured folks. So I tend to think it's going to be a little better. The health profiles are usually a little more favorable of active employees. Homeless transportation. We have had some needs for homeless transportation. This represents the cost of basically transporting one student for the year. It can be very expensive. In fact, it can be significantly more expensive than that. Oftentimes when we get some homeless, it's not for the full year. It can be one way or the other, but we do have some concerns in that area this year. So we're just trying to make sure we budget for it and we have something in there. Special education transportation, again, we have the percentage increase plus some increases in utilization this past year. On a good note, Berlin's out of district special education population is staying stable, right? So the numbers we have there. Small jump in electricity. I've been pulling fiscal 24 end of year numbers as I sharpen my pencil and we get to 6 months of fiscal 25 numbers. I will also look at those and see where things are trending. Again, I go back to the best predictor of the future is the past. So our fiscal 24 numbers with a little bit of an inflation factor for electricity is sort of where I find that $10,000 increase based on utilization. And then again, tuitions and fees, those are those out of district tuitions, not a tremendous increase overall, but it's dollar wise, but as a percent, it's just normal placement changes. It's still the same numbers.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Under employee health and retiree health,
Mhm.
where do we get our insurance policies from?
Yeah. We go through the Massachusetts Intergovernmental Insurance Agency, MIIA. They are a large sort of risk pool for intergovernmental insurance.
Do districts around here use that? Is it a geographic preference to use them?
It's not a geographic. I don't know who else in the immediate area uses it. being new. I know a number
Fair
of,
enough.
many districts do. They are more utilized for workers' compensation, property liability. There are a number of small health insurance, self-insurance organizations throughout the state. In fact, my prior district was in the health insurance group. There's a Hampshire County health insurance group. And then there's GIC, which is the big state model. There's pros and cons to all of them. And, I think GIC, for example, is a much bigger pool. So it might be a little more stable in terms of your annual increases because of the size of the pool, but they have very consistent increases that border on double digit as well. So
They were the group that was, so we've met them once, at least I've met them once, Aaron will meet them for the first time. There are a lot of districts on the North Shore that they also are using them as well too. I can get that information for you when we meet with them as well. There's been a few changes taking place in the district as well in the central office, and that's just one thing that we just kept continuing with them at this time at least.
I'm a retired.
Okay.
School.
Yep. Okay.
And my benefits, even when I was working for the school systems I worked for, with the GIC.
Mhm.
So I wondered in my,
Mhm.
because I know that this is like school systems around Boston and suburban Boston.
Yeah.
And I thought the pool must be larger and therefore perhaps premiums can be managed better, but I don't know insurance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is just an experiential.
Sure, we can at least get
Right.
for you who other districts in the area that I can get that information and send that off there.
Right.
That's an easy ask for us.
I will share a big factor in that rate increase is there was a change to the law regarding out-of-pocket maximums. So, it doesn't change the budget reality of it for us. But if you are a retiree or an employee, your maximum out-of-pocket used to be 8,000, now it's 2,000. So if you're someone who is, in particular, taking more medications, going to the doctors more, which is again typical of, say, retirees. We had a meeting with retirees recently and they were very initially shocked by the 18% increase. But then when they started talking about, well, I hit the 8,000 maximum in the first 4 months of the year last year, right? And so this increase might feel significant, but in the long run, it's actually going to save me quite a bit of money. Now, that doesn't change our budget issue, right?
No.
But for the employee side, it actually, for a number of people, it's also, yes, you're going to pay more monthly, but it also gives you sort of that rest assurance that you will have a lower kind of out-of-pocket maximum, which I think might be helpful to some people.
Thank you. I
Yep.
appreciate that.
Sure thing.
I have a real quick question for retiree. What's the split between the percentage between employee and the district? Is it 50-50, 70-30,
For retirees, I believe it's 50-50.
50-50?
Yeah. I will double check that though, but I'm pretty sure it's 50-50.
pretty sure.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
You should know more than anyone, right? At least with regards to that.
Experience tells me 50.
It's 50-50, yes.
So getting into the actual assessment process. So we have the school budget. Then we have the share of the central office. So that's the district share. Going back to sort of that front page in the cost center allocation, to a total budget allocated for BMS. Taking away chapter 70, again, that is probably a low number for chapter 70, possibly a low number for chapter 71 next, to the net total assessment for Berlin Memorial of $5,271,052. Makes some sense?
Mhm.
We're okay there? Okay, good. As we get into Honto, somewhat similar budget drivers. So you'll see salaries, you'll see employee health, you'll see retiree health. Tohoto has had some pretty significant increases in the need for substitutes. I'm actually a little bit surprised. I haven't seen it at the other schools. So again, I did go back to 2024 to look at those numbers and just tease them out. In everywhere. I'm on a number of different business organizations for human resource as well as business. People are seeing significant increases in people using their sick time utilization. We have the same issue with students. The state is really kind of pushing down on our student attendance and even our staff attendance. I think the challenge is, through COVID and after COVID, the message from the state was, if you're not feeling well, stay home, right? Stay home, stay home, stay home. So everybody followed what the state told them to do, right? I remember a time when, prior to COVID, if my own child had a mild fever, we'd give them some Advil and try to shuffle them off the bus, and we'd kind of cross our fingers and see what happened. I don't think people are doing that anymore as much, right? Some people might, but it's not happening as often. And the same with teachers, the same with staff. So there really is some conversation about whether this is just the new normal, right? If I'm out sick, well, my job just needs to get done and we don't need a sub for me. But for students, we need to have, an adult in front of students, ideally a certified teacher, but if not, a substitute of some sort.
And we're going to be looking at possibly a building subs, right? So one of the things that we had in similar districts before was every school had a designated building sub. So that person reported every day. I'm sorry to say, but it happens in every one of our schools every single day. There's a multiple number of people that are out. But it's not only just having a sub in there, but it's also that consistency for the student, right? So if we have a building-based sub, then they know the day, they know the routines, they know the kids, they know what things are taking place, a lot better than having just a person coming in subbing and following the lesson plans. We're preliminary looking at that, just starting that and see what it will look like. But that will be certainly a goal that I'd like to see in our district.
So when you're saying that, kids are staying home for one reason or another, does the state have a limit, requirement, like?
Yeah, it's not a limit that impacts the students. It's a limit that impacts us. So our state assessment figures are based on student attendance. So once a student misses 10% of the year, that's 18 days. For any reason, a student can be hospitalized for something very significant. The state doesn't care. It's straight across the board. Once they've missed 18 days, they are considered chronically absent. So, I think we have a lot of people think, that sending in that note from the doctor somehow makes things right. It doesn't. It doesn't with the state. It doesn't matter. You can just call most days you can just call your kid out unless you're out for a long period of time or you've been chronically absent. We do have processes and procedures in place so that if students are absent for more than a certain number of days, we send letters home. And in districts, I don't know what the policy is here, and Al, you may know it. Yeah. There is a point when we do report to this. If a student is really, really chronically absent, there's a point in which we file with the Department of Children and Families.
There's only we're working on a policy actually right now about student attendance, right? So that was part. Sorry, go ahead.
No, because when you're talking about that, when you have this chronic, at some point, then that means the student can't really keep up with that year.
Yeah. So one of the things we're working with is a policy, like I was saying, and we worked on that last night at school committee, and we're going to continue to work on that. We're bringing it back to our principals again. Please understand there's only 3 reasons why a child is an excused absence. Other than that, it's absence. It's either death, religious, or hospitalization, right? Those are the only 3 that are, they're sort of expunged. They're still there, but but we really are looking at the amount of students that are absent, right? If a parent is taking their child out for a doctor's appointment, we want you to take your child to the doctor's appointment and then bring them right back to school, right? In the past, what we saw was people were taking them out for a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment because it's hard to get them at the end of the day or hard to get them before school starts because that's what everyone wants. But what we're trying to push is, parents, yes, we understand that, but you got to bring them back to school, because just because you have a note from the doctor saying you went to the dentist at 11 o'clock, that doesn't excuse that absence for the entire day. So we're really working on that.
But you are Absolutely correct, right? So the saying, I can't remember who said it, but 80% of life is being there,
Yeah.
right? And so when students aren't in school, they fall behind. And then we spend a lot more energy on interventions, right? Because those students then have trouble learning, they need to catch up, what have you. We do usually have processes in place. If a student has a single long hospitalization, we usually have some processes and procedures, and we know that's going to happen. But these sort of, just chronic absenteeism for no other reason, that becomes a real challenge because they've missed a lot of material, 10% or more.
The other piece we got to realize when we're looking at our staffing, we have a lot of young staff that still have young children, right? So there are many times, back to what Aaron said, they're keeping their children home, right? And so someone has to stay home with them as well too. So it's not always just their sick absence because they're sick, but also because a child that they have this might be as well too.
Fair point.
But it's concerning and it's
Mhm.
cost centered as well too. And our cost for subs is very minimal, right? And that's a concern as well too. We're not getting as many subs as we should be getting because our cost, what we're paying them is extremely low.
You anticipated my next question. I look at a number like an increase of $24,250. What is it sub paid on
I knew, as I said it, I knew you were gonna say it. It's, I think it's like, I don't even know if it's
I believe it's about $100.
$100, yeah, yeah, 100 a day, yeah, it's about 100 a day. Which, if you divide it by 6.5 hours, right, it's not very, a large amount of money. And for the expectations that we have for these people, right, and making sure that they're following the curriculum, following lesson plans and overseeing our kids.
Are they required to be licensed teachers?
They are not, because if they were, we'd be hiring them as teachers
Okay.
as well too, yeah.
Which again speaks to the idea of a building sub, right? Someone who knows processes, routines, emergency issues, right? We bring in subs, and if there's a fire drill or an actual emergency, they often don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And we have to have people help them and direct them. So, that
But
becomes
please
challenging.
know all of our subs go through Corey, they go through Sori. We're looking for them to have at least associates or 2 years of college.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Special ed transportation and private special ed tuitions. You will see down below, there's an asterisk. Tohoto has had 2 move ups, 1 move in and 1 new placement this year. So there's been some significant increases to our out of district placement population. I have applied circuit breaker to those placements in Tohoto. Is everybody familiar with circuit breaker?
Yes.
Mhm.
I am being conservative with that for now. As we continue through the year and we get some numbers, I will certainly bring that up a little bit, the amount that we're using. So again, like these numbers are scary, but they're meant to be scary a little bit, right? That's the intent. So both the private and collaborative special education tuitions have some increases. So we get to a final Tohoto budget with the addition of the district share, then followed by the addition of chapter 70 of 1.5 million, chapter 71 transportation aid of 225. It seems that the charter reimbursement amount has been applied to Tohoto, I think with the premise that it flows to both towns, right? It doesn't, it's hard to figure out exactly where to apply that and which students it applies to. So that goes there. To a total assessed value, continuing on the next slide, we have that total assessed value from the top. And then highlighted, I have Berlin's minimum local contribution to Tohoto, Boylston's minimum, and then we have the above minimum and then Berlin's share. I believe it's in the ballpark of 35-65, give or take. Again, I'm putting my pencil to those numbers and figuring out where things go. So looking at total assessments, right now, if we were having to do it today, we'd be looking at a total operating assessment of about 9.
Sorry, Aaron, going
Yeah.
back, looking at the Tohoto assessments, the minimum local contributions, did you use numbers from the fiscal?
I'm sorry, they were from
25?
from last year.
25.
They were from 25.
Okay,
Yes, those aren't,
thank you.
the new ones aren't available yet.
Sure,
So I
that's
just-
what I was just
Yeah, and
confirming what I thought.
it's hard to make rhyme or reason about how the state chooses to come
Mhm.
up with those minimum local contributions. They're based on a combination of property values and income.
I looked at the formula.
Yeah, I had to dig into the formula a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And there's no possible way for me to try to figure that out without that information. So, we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So we get to a total operating assessment of 9.5 million, give or take. Then we get into, the Tohoto, it should be, our MHS Regional Middle High School. I'm sorry, there's a typo there. I meant to fix that. I caught it earlier. I even showed it to
And we
Al.
talked about it, yes.
I even showed it to Al and then forgot about it. So you have two bonds for Tohoto. There's a 2021 refinance and then a 2018 bond, as I can tell. Your principal payments, your interest payments, Berlin total share of $538,504 for the year. I've seen debt assessed different ways, so I'm just making the note down below that it appears to have been assessed as part of the capital assessment. If that's incorrect, let me know. In my prior district, it was just included as part of the operating assessment as a budget line item for us, basically.
Yeah, June?
The reason that we have it separated is because we did it as a debt exclusion.
Yeah.
So that's why it's
Okay.
appeared in there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me how it's
It's
done.
all
It's
gets
just,
lumped
yeah,
in.
it all gets in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. As long as we do. So now we get into our good friend capital. So that you know, I did submit all of our capital requests to Kristen by October 31st as requested. All of those, the sheet, every sheet I shared with her includes a link to backup materials that include quotes, or some sort of basis. It's sometimes hard to get quotes, and I think I want to be clear that any quote we get today is not going to be valid by June. So, you know, we're doing the best we can, and sometimes we do actual quotes, sometimes we use some sort of cost basis, but we do try to get the best estimate that we can get for you in the moment. So if you need that, I did bring a few of them because I think they're larger items if anyone wanted them. I think we've asked for classroom mini splits in the past. I know it was on the request and was denied last year. It's just coming around again. We find ourselves, again, with IEP needs. So students have IEP needs, and we find ourselves having to add air conditioning for IEP needs. Those are contractual needs. We also sometimes have staff who have a disability that requires them to have an air conditioner or something like that. We're looking at what those options are, but we're kind of keeping that on there. This would be to kind of complete the project and get all of, I believe it's all or most of the classrooms mini splits.
And just to add to that, right, so our job in the district that we're in as superintendent director of finance is looking for the equity across our district, right? That's one of our primary responsibilities. In Boylston, they have, you know, air conditioned rooms, right? And so when we're going into some of those classrooms in Berlin, especially even when I came in that August, right, in September, there were some hot days. And it's not only for our IEPs, but for our teachers, but they're warm classrooms. And there's those windows aren't the large opening windows to get that fresh air in there as well too. So it does make it difficult for our kids. So we're looking to have similar to what we're seeing in Boylston, also to have in Berlin for the kids and for the adults.
So we have a roof replacement on the docket for this year, and John Campbell also recommended that we include the potential for solar on that roof. So there is a cost proposal for solar. We actually did go out and get a cost proposal for that. So that would be to add solar. There are, within that cost proposal, there are projected electricity savings. Again, that's more or less a sales proposal, so I'm always a little skeptical of those. I would certainly, if you did solar, I would probably look to see, right, what happens with electric bill. I
But you know what,
have,
but
so,
wait a minute.
yeah, I mean, we're not, yeah.
Yeah, it's their
sorry,
meeting,
yeah.
it's their meeting, sorry,
Correct, I'm
sorry.
not here to argue. So we have a quote, we have a valid quote for 360,000.
Mhm.
At any point, when we do this work, we will bid it out, and we will get 3 quotes from 3 responsible bidders who are certified to do the work and pay prevailing wage.
No, you're talking
Sure.
about, I gotta look confused. So you have the quote out for the roof and then you have a separate quote out for the
Yes,
solar.
yes, we have separate quotes.
Because, I mean, my question though on the solar is the town also has a committee
Mhm.
that deals with green energy.
Sure,
So they would probably have to be rolled into this process. Is that correct?
yeah.
So this is why it's
Right.
good that you're coming tonight because
Mhm.
we can start figuring out who
Fair enough.
all the stakeholders are on this process,
Yeah.
because the town owns the school and you lease it. So we have to make sure, it's not that we don't want you to have it, that we basically involve all the relevant committees, so.
I'm putting it on as an option.
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
isn't me pushing for solar. This is me going out and getting a fair quote for this and just trying to give you a sense of what the cost might be. I think it's also fair to point out that this is today's cost,
Mhm.
right? June, the cost may be different.
Yeah.
That's just the
So-
reality of
And
things.
so we also have an understanding that you're probably not gonna fund all these capital requests at this time,
Yeah.
right? So we're
Yeah.
just putting them on there, and then if it's not something we do this year, but we wanna make sure that you're gonna continue to see that
Yeah.
year after year, right?
Well, can I also, I'm sorry, do you want to?
No, you go ahead.
I was good, because I also, I'm the finance committee rep on the capital
Mhm.
planning committee, so I
Sure.
get the, if you guys show that there, I'll see you there.
Yeah, we'll be there the 19th.
So basically, they work basically on a 5-year
Hmm.
plan, but it is basically what you're saying. If you're bringing in it now and we can see this need is coming up. We just had that with like another department was saying, they had 2 items, but they're like, one of them we can split or do
Yeah.
all next year. It's kind of having it in advance
Mhm.
helps people make their decisions. And you said that you're working on a 10-year plan,
Yeah.
which again, I know it's a lot of work,
Mhm.
but it makes it easier for everybody going forward.
Yeah.
So,
And we're completely respectful that we understand these are your buildings, right? We're renting them. So if that's something you'd want to put on there or not, we're just saying that this is something that we're looking at and that the principal of Berlin also.
I'm not saying they'd be against it, it's just making
Mhm.
sure all the people who need to be involved are involved. So you're not at town meeting finding out you don't have what you need to get it.
I would, so, my recommendation based on experience would be to never put solar on an old roof,
Mhm.
right? But if you did the roof 1 year and did solar the next, right? That might be doable as well. You're not putting it on an old roof, right? You're putting it on a
Mhm.
relatively new roof.
So-
Your solar is gonna last, 15 years maybe.
Mhm.
Your roof's hopefully gonna last longer than
Huh.
that. So, if you only had 5 years left on your roof, I'd say don't do it.
Mhm.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you're looking to do a new roof, the time to at least start thinking about it is now.
Mhm.
So,
So
Fair.
just a question in your conversations with
Mhm.
Principal John Campbell,
Yeah.
would he consider a ground mount as opposed to a roof mount? Just,
I don't know.
just a wild idea, so,
Okay.
and,
Yeah.
and to echo what Julie said, we
Mhm.
do have significant energy planning.
Mhm.
We have at least one person I'm thinking of who's really good
You
in
guys
town.
could put up a parking shelter with charging
Yeah.
stations.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
I visualize that, which
Okay.
is
I
why
live
I
in
asked.
Amherst and UMass just put up a bunch of those. They're beautiful.
That's,
And a wonderful use, but they're very expensive. I'm not.
well, all
I'm
right,
a little-
but
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that's with the charger business combined, yeah. So again, our energy people, it's useful to
Fair
talk to them
Okay,
because
we'll have
it's-
those conversations.
it would be
Sorry,
great to be
speak.
planning that kind of thing.
But I would look at many districts or schools that have done that as well too.
Mhm.
I was part of the one grouping that did that in Worcester when we first were putting those in, and we put them at Burco High in the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Great shelter for the cars, right? Everyone loved it. So the first time we got a snowstorm, right, and you had to plow, right? And so had to move all around those things, and it became a whole other issue. And the cost that we're paying for plowing from when they were just able to plow,
Mhm.
as opposed to having all these solar things that they had to go around, was almost tripled. So we're saving it in electricity, but paying it
Mhm.
in that. So I would
Right.
beg you to look at other districts and what they've done and see what it looks like before you make those moves as well too. And I love, just something to think about, that's all. Just something to
Another
think
planning and advisory,
Yeah.
forget
about. Just something to think about.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
So we're looking at a floor scrubber, not a huge cost, but something that is needed to really get up some of the gunk on the floors. I mean, they take a lot of work, they take a lot of beating. Elevator controls are probably gonna be a pretty high priority item for us. Non-working elevators get you in a lot of trouble and end up costing you a tremendous amount when you have to fix them on short notice. So I think that would be relatively high. Many of our blinds and or window treatments, you know, we might look at some different options for this. There are window films and things like that, but are not working. So they're very old. They won't open and close and things like that. And those are important, for weather. You know, in the winter, they actually provide a little bit of insulation. The summer, they keep the sun out. And they also act as a security feature, right? So if we have an issue with security outside the building, those blinds can be closed. So it's important.
It's also, it's all those things, but also curbside appeal, right? So when you're driving by a school and the blinds are all broken and parents are looking and people are looking at our community, whether they're gonna move here, that's important for them. They're looking at small things like that, just know that.
So we're looking at some camera replacements. I believe we're looking at those at both elementaries right now, but the totals in that are about 130,000. I think of the items that we submitted, I don't know what we submitted for that. We did a camera job at Tohoto fairly recently for somewhere over 140,000. So we're kind of scaling that number down and sort of projecting some thoughts on that.
We're coming up with a safety plan right now, as you know. It's something we really need to have in our district. We have Rich Cameron, who's the assistant principal at the high school right now. He's our safety liaison for the entire district now. We have Rob Pizzella coming in, right, and who is in Worcester for many years. That's their safety person, training our staff as well too. One of the things that we really need to have is a security system in terms of the cameras, right? We're used to, all of our cameras are working in our schools, but they're working when you go into school and you're able to see them and you're able to look at the recording. But we also want to be able to have the ability to see what's taking place in school when we're not physically in the building as well too. God forbid there was something going on there as well too. So one of the safety concerns that we need to really be looking at is replacing those cameras across all of our districts as well.
So then you see student and staff device replacement. That's the item that we feel might be eligible to go on to operations. Again, just a thought, we're throwing it out there. But we cycle through Chromebooks. You know, every single year, there's some number of Chromebooks and staff devices, laptops and things like that that just have to be replaced every year.
But from having also attended some of the meetings last year where they were talking about the curriculum and the devices, there seems to be very, I mean, I'm from the outside, but they seem to be very interconnected now. Knowing that, because they basically said, you went from having to get lots of physical books and materials to now everything has gone basically, to these various systems. So making sure that your hardware is compatible with the curriculum services that you're using. I mean, that sounds like, again, you're talking about something you really do need to be doing because you're going to be having to cover that for.
Correct. And one of the challenges that education across the board is facing right now is, I'm sure you're all familiar with software as a service, right? So all of our curricular materials in many ways are moving to software as a service. So instead of buying a bunch of math textbooks or a bunch of books, we still do buy some math materials, physical materials, but now we're literally having to pay that every single year. And we're finding that the all-in cost over time is more, and we just don't have a choice. And we have, all of these resources that we really can't do without at this point in some ways. It's challenging.
The thing you'll hear us talk about, and we're working with curriculum people as well too, is we have a lot of programs that are out there and that we're paying for, but we don't exactly know what our usage is as well too. We have iExcel. I'll give that as one example. It's a great program, very expensive program that we're using as part of our curriculum, but how many teachers are really using that, right? And is it something that it looks like every year we're putting it on our budget, but we're going to take a deep dive in and say, are people really using it? And if they're not, then maybe we need to look at something different as well too.
So there's some hard.
That's the
questions
work
we
we're
need to
doing.
ask.
Yeah.
and I think there was a huge upsurgence in use of online materials in COVID because it was an absolute necessity. And I think there are some things we may still be clinging to, right? That may not be getting as much use as we would hope or would need to justify the expense. And so we're also looking at sort of collaborating. A number of the principals have said, can we make this particular software a district-wide? So as we're talking about the cost center, their eyes are lighting up and they're going, why do we have to do 3 purchase orders for the same software that we're buying? Can't we just put that in the district and split it? So we're having some of those conversations around that. I'm trying to take maybe baby steps with that and not necessarily saying we're going to do that all at once, but maybe this year get people comfortable with the idea of a central office cost center, but then talk about those very specific expenses next year that might be better served in district-wide, so people don't see a big jump in district-wide expenses and wonder why that would be shifting from the schools. That's not our intent, to increase the central office. The intent is to figure out where we can be most efficient.
And what are we seeing success with these programs, right? So we really got to look at that. We need to develop scope and sequences. We need to be really looking at our curriculum and saying, are we getting the results that we're looking for on that? So before we even doing what Aaron's saying, which is financially the best thing to be doing, but is it the right program for our school? And more importantly, are our teachers using it? And are they getting the professional learning that they need to be able to use it as well too? A lot of things teachers are comfortable with. There might be a certain app that they're comfortable with, but that's not really what we're using across the entire district. So just because they're comfortable with it, we're paying for that, but could we bring it across the entire district as well too? So there's a lot of things we need to look at.
That kind of covers where from Memorial. Okay, so getting into Tohoto. Again, these costs, these do not represent Berlin-only costs. These represent shared costs. So you'd be paying, again, the 65-35 roughly split. The very first item is updating the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, building automation system. So, you know, all of these buildings are running on computerized systems now. And did any of you see about the high school that couldn't shut its lights off for about 2 years? Okay.
No.
Well, that was my school in Hampden Wilbraham. We made Saturday Night Live. We made all of the national news. And that was an issue where our lighting system, our building lighting system, was all computerized. The server that ran it crashed. It was proprietary in nature, so we couldn't touch it. We couldn't do a single thing with it. We actually did not have access to it from day one. It was built on an MSBA project, so we had no say even in this system. MSBA said you're putting it in. That's super. So we spent 6 months trying to track down the actual owner of the company because they had been bought and sold 6 times. We then negotiated the materials, ordered them, and it spent 12 months on a boat waiting to come to us, and then 6 more months to get installed. So in that time, our entire high school, which if you see it, is in the middle of kind of town and has windows everywhere. So it was lit up like a Christmas tree, and everyone in town at 2 a.m. could see the lights on full bore, much to our embarrassment. So
the plus was the lights were on, stuck on, and not stuck off. So that was the plus of that, right? Trying to
a lot of funny stories around that I can share another time.
Saturday Night Live, you got to watch it. It was unbelievable when we saw that.
You know, these are sort of things I worry about, right? So that's lights, and having your lights on all the time is embarrassing. Having no heat or air conditioning or what have you is a little beyond embarrassing. It would represent a big challenge. So we need to look at that. A number of items in the auditorium, I believe last year. So the auditorium lighting and sound system were being done in 3 phases. Phase 1 was not approved last year, so we've rolled it into phase 2. You know, we can have conversations about this, about how we want to do that. And I think once we have a 10-year capital plan that's shared with you, or at least get to year 5, that will become more evident to the towns that these are things we're looking to do in stages. And this is how we're trying to do it. So I want to be fair and say that, you know, this is definitely a conversation we can have on both those items. Auditorium overhead lighting, those are just the can lights in the ceiling. We need to replace those LED bulbs. Middle school furniture, I don't know if anyone has gone into the middle school at Tohoto. The furniture they have appears to be elementary school furniture. We have many middle schoolers who are as tall as I am or taller. And I've sat in that furniture and I look comical. I can't imagine how comfortable it is. We are trying to piecemeal some options. But the principal would very much, Lisa would very much like to, if that full amount couldn't be done, some amount to try to start right sizing some of that furniture. I don't know. I have no idea. I wasn't here why that furniture was bought and who made those decisions, but it is very clearly elementary school sized furniture. Not really. Again, this is replacing a floor scrubber. There is a floor scrubber. It's reaching its end of life. It's time to replace that. The phone system is reaching its end of life. We're looking to replace that. Again, that's a bit of a security item as well. Staff and student device replacement. I meant to have a note at the bottom of that. I apologize. There was a significant amount of money that was not approved last year for student device replacement. So we have rolled some of that in. Again, this is something we see as a conversation piece. We'd like to, you know, if we're going to continue a one-to-one program at Tohoto, as I think people are desiring, we need to know that we're going to be able to replace those devices. We can talk about numbers because there is some ability to maybe limp along and stretch some things. But if we don't know what's coming year to year, it gets a little more challenging.
When you say devices, you're talking like the Chromebooks. or
Chromebooks,
whatever
largely
each student needs to
Chromebooks,
have- Each
right.
has to have one up.
Yeah, there are some students who, instead of Chromebooks, do use iPads. Some of them, most kids will get a basic Chromebook. There are other students who have maybe higher needs, who will have a keyboard that also need a touchpad Chromebook at a bit of a higher cost. So there's a couple nuances to that, but by and large, it's 90% or more Chromebooks.
And again, we'll feel much more comfortable once we have that tech plan in place, right? Exactly what we're looking for year after year.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Staff, when you do the student devices, right, is that done per grade? Like,
You guys-
do certain grades have iPads, additional grades have?
Scott.
Scott, yeah. We're actually, I'm not the questions. Okay.
Okay.
I will share with you that those devices are allocated by needs. So when I see some kids will get iPads, it's because they have specific needs that require them to maybe have an iPad. Sometimes it's communication. They struggle with communicating, and iPads have really great software that helps students communicate with language.
It's also a huge transition, right? So many younger kids are used to their parents' phones or iPads, and then all of a sudden we're putting them on a Chromebook, and that whole transition to using a keyboard is a skill set they don't have. So that's really what we're working at. So that's
Actually, I'm kind of curious because when I was in high school, I had to learn how to type. We didn't even have computers,
yeah.
but we all had to learn how to type.
It's not there.
So we
We're not
were
teaching that.
ready.
Yeah.
So we were getting ready. We were the very first students who were getting the computers, and we had, so they don't even have to.
I've always said they should have keyboarding.
So
how do they just have to learn on their own to understand the keyboard? Or is
largely
that
they
part of
figure it out.
They pen.
There's not, there are some schools do teach keyboarding to some degree. Actual touch typing is a lost art. I do recall taking typing in high school, and I got up to a whopping 18 words a minute. Wonderful. I was terrible. But touch typing is a bit of a lost art now. There are a lot of people, and depending on what you do, I've met computer programmers who can program 2 separate devices with one hand on each device, and they're faster than I could ever type. So I think there's different skill sets aligning. So when we talk about a student who might use an iPad instead of a Chromebook, might be a student who's non-verbally communicative, right?
Mhm.
And may have some intellectual impairments that whereby they might use an image pad to display words, right? Bathroom, what have you, as a communication device. So they wouldn't be using a traditional Chromebook. There might be other students with other needs related to their ability to use their hands that might require them to have a different device. And we talk about equity, right?
Mhm.
Depending on their abilities, their level, and their needs, we want to make sure that every student has as equitable access as possible. So, yeah.
Yeah, on that category of student, so it's us as the sending district pays for the devices if they're going out of district, or does the private school that will repay the tuition provide the device? Sorry, I have to, it popped into my head, I have to
Hit or
ask.
miss sometimes.
What do we want? What do we want to do in that circumstance?
I would.
Or
like-
Al, maybe? I don't know.
They're still our kids. I mean,
Okay.
I have an affinity for this. They are our kids. I think we need to do the right thing for our children.
Okay.
And if they need a specialized device, typically, so my wife's an occupational therapist in our children's school district, and she goes out to out of district placements. And she recommends, and our school district will provide a device if that out of district placement isn't going. It's relative to the cost of that out of district placement. It's not an extraordinary cost.
I realize that. I look at two buckets in the financial
Yep.
plan here and I'm saying, okay, wait a minute, we have.
Right.
Is it in both
Right, some
buckets
of
or is
those
it in
might
one?
be devices for an out of student who has more severe needs. In and out of district placement. Out of district placements can be very hit or miss. We had an out of district placement the past couple of years in my prior district that served lunch, but we had to pay for lunch.
Yeah,
It was like
understood.
$4.50 a day. And I'm like, I'm paying you $120,000 a year. Can you just roll it into the tuition? But no, they sent us a bill.
Well,
for
yes, and
lunch.
I think these considerations speak to why devices maybe belong in operating budget as opposed to capital, because you,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
because you're lining it up with the actual student needs for that given year.
Yeah, and let's be clear about that whole process, right? When they're leaving our district, that's a mutually agreed upon decision, right, between the districts as well too. The one thing that we have to make sure of is that we're documenting all that. So if we're sending off a student, we're documenting that student was given a computer, was given that piece of technology, and that we're making sure that we receive it back. So those are conversations that happen between the ascending
Sure,
and
sure.
the descending.
Sure.
The one other piece I know what you're talking about is about the touch, the keyboard skills. You know, before coming here, where I was at Veterini, right? And so our kids struggled with that as well too. They're so used to that iPad. So there are Chromebooks, right, that have the keyboard, but also the touch as well too. But there's an added expense. So you have that, okay? So there's an added expense to that as well too, right? And so we're trying to also keep the cost down from as well. So, but again, we'll be looking at that when we're moving out.
Well, I mean, because I wonder about it, because as I said, it's, coming from that generation, we didn't even start with the computers.
Sure.
We had to learn it. And now I do everything on my phone.
Sure.
When you're talking about the kids, that's me.
I was at Berlin the other day, and I saw the kid touching the screen, and it wasn't one of those screens, but that's what they're just used to from their iPads or their phones and things like that. So
And so it's kind of like trying to picture, as you're building this tech plan, what are they going to need? Not what I needed, because I'm much older than they are. I needed to learn how to touch type because I wouldn't have been able to do anything at the academic level without knowing how a keyboard worked.
and that tech plan is not going to happen in isolation, right? They're going to
Yeah.
be working with both principals, all three principals, I'm sorry, with our curriculum directors,
Yeah.
with our school committee. Like, again, one of our subcommittees in school committee is one of the technology pieces, right? That they'll be looking at all that and vetting that throughout there. So there are a lot of plans that are already out there. We're not going to reinvent the wheel, right? Well, most districts have a technology plan of that as well. So when we have that ready to roll, and we're just starting to look at it, we will absolutely be sharing that out as well too. And that will impact this.
Yeah.
I want, if I may, I want to thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
It's very clear. Thank you. It's easy to follow. And, your comments fill in the blanks, but when I go home and I don't have you to answer the question, there's enough data here that I can read it, understand it, and get the picture. So I appreciate that. And thank you.
There's one piece I want you to add, Aaron, is about the Boylston piece that's not in this presentation.
Yes.
Right, so
Yes.
just wait.
So I've intentionally split out the presentations for Berlin and Boylston, knowing that we were going for Boylston first. I pulled Berlin out for Boylston. I pulled for Boylston out for Berlin. The next iterations you see will include both towns. Typically, as we start presenting to the school committee, I will combine the two, and you'll have one bigger presentation.
We didn't think it was fair for us to be talking at Boylston and you for the first time seeing it on the screen or watching that meeting instead of us hearing it with you guys first, and vice versa with Boylston and Broke.
And we are, this is a collaborative process. I want to be clear that, you know, we don't see this as, you know, a demand. We understand you guys have limits. You only have so much money. You have a lot of things to spend that money on. You have police, fire, DPW. And Al, if I can ever be criticized in any way, it's always going to be fighting too hard for school budgets. I will fight for a school budget, but that does not mean that I don't understand the needs of the town.
Yeah.
So just to be fair.
And that's why you put us in these roles, right? That's our job, be fighting for, and I don't want to use the word fighting, right? But we're gonna be there, holding our own ground, right? For what we think is best for our teachers, for our administrators, and for our students, right? I've said it, you've heard me probably in my interview say it, we're a really good school district, but we can be better, and we could be great. And that's the work we need to do, is take it from being a good school district. And just one last note with regards to that, one of the things you'll start seeing, and we're just rolling it out, at Tohoto, first thing you'll see it both in Berlin and Boylston is a new website, right? And you're gonna see how much interactive it is and how current it is, and it's tied to social media, in the users. And we're also putting it so that when people are Googling, right, current schools in the area, you're gonna see Tohoto or Berlin pop up or Boylston pop up as well too. And at the next school committee meeting, we'll have that unveiling of that. But it's all about curbside appeal, right? Parents are looking, and even when I was first asked about this community, I went right to the website. And it's not as impressive as we should have it. And so that's one of the things we're working on, so that we can get more children to be able to come into our district, right? Because that's really what we want. And so you'll start seeing that happening in the next month. We're ready to roll that out actually by the end of this month. So in January, we'll see that as well. But there's a cost that goes along with that as well.
Okay, one question, I want to just backtrack one thing, just to, unless I missed it on page 6, on the tax census.
Yep.
Now, you have listed like the refinance and all the things being done.
Yep.
I'm just curious because I'm not sure how we've broken that. Was the bond like incorporated into the operating budget previously?
No, so I am,
Great question.
we shared this with Kristen, and I wasn't sure if it reached you. The past 2 years, if you go back in time and look, past 2 years ago, you will see that your payment dropped fairly significantly. For whatever reason, I was not here. The person who provided you with your debt assessment seems to have missed one of the interest payments on each of the bonds. So, to the tune of a total of about $225,000 a year.
For both Berlin and Boylston as well.
Yeah, so combined. So,
Right.
so
the total was
this
225%.
is, this isn't making up for it. It's just correcting it in the new year. In
So
fiscal
previous years, you didn't notice that difference, huh?
I'm sure we did.
Just asking.
Sometimes when it drops, you don't ask questions, right?
We didn't have enough detail to see anything.
Yeah.
Fair
last
enough.
2 years.
So
Well,
hopefully,
complicating thing with the
Yeah.
refinance happening there at the same, right?
Sure,
Right.
sure.
yeah. I have sent. Yeah, I have sent the debt schedule over. I want to be fully transparent about that. It seems that there wasn't, I do not know what the cause of it was. I'm not going to dig into that, but that impacted 24 and 25. So we will assess properly.
When we first found out about this, we let school committee know, obviously, and then we let Kristen know, and then we also let in Boylston help me out.
Harold.
Thank you.
Howard, sorry, Howard.
I have a question on page 5, the minimum local contribution.
Sure.
So the two numbers for Berlin, so the first number, the 1974,
Yep.
is what our required minimum contribution is? and the
Yes, that's what this-
22.9 is what we actually contribute?
The 1.9 million is what the state says you must contribute as an absolute minimum.
Okay,
The above minimum is what's left over when you take out those. So the 2,292,000 is in addition. So the next page, you will see, you have three items. You have your Berlin Memorial, you have Honto minimum local contribution, and then you have the Honto above minimum local contribution.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So sorry if that was confusing.
That represent net school spending?
Hmm?
Does that represent net school spending kind?
Yeah, so minimum local contribution, if you were to take that with your chapter 70 and kind of roll them into a ball, that would more or less be your minimum net school spending. There are some other small factors, but those are really like your foundation budget is very similar to your minimum net school spending. There are some nuances, but it's usually very close or exactly the same.
And just back to page 6 for a second, is everyone clear about the bond and what happened? I don't admit, I know we sort of just passed over it a little bit, but I might say,
Well, obviously you caught up with payments, right? I mean, do we have penalties? Do we have?
They were paid. I mean, the district
We
paid
paid
the
it.
money.
Well, the district had. to-
just,
Yeah.
we had to pay them,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, we still have to pay
But,
them.
but
It's our error.
respectfully, you were sent bills and you paid the bills that you were supposed to, that you were given.
Okay.
But you weren't given that second set of bills that should have happened in terms of,
But we still paid the bills on behalf of the district.
but that's why you're seeing a difference from last year's to this year's. But for the last 2 years, you might have seen a drop from the previous year. So when you go back and look and so that.
And you're speaking to the 2018 bond.
Both of them.
Oh, both
So there,
together.
yeah, so,
Okay.
so those bonds, so each of those bonds has 2 annual payments. One is interest only and one is interest in principal. It appears to me that whoever,
Billed you guys.
Build you guys put this together, omitted the interest only payment because it comes out to exactly that amount. It's, you know, it's pretty standard in a bond repayment schedule. I don't know, I mean, but, you know, so it's something I've dealt with bond repayment schedules pretty regularly. So when I was asked for the numbers for last year, which is what, it's not something I would normally go looking for. Honestly, Berlin asked us for the numbers and I started digging. It took me a little digging to find them. I kind of apologize for that. But then when I saw them, I went, oh, geez, we need to have like some conversations about this. So we did, and we provided the corrected numbers, and we'll continue going.
So we're back in schedule, but that would explain that difference that you're seeing as well, too.
Did it happen with Boylston also?
Happened with Boylston as
so
well.
Boylston, yeah, both Berlin and Boylston were
So-
under.
Nice to know you're treated equally.
Yes.
Even
Well,
handed,
for
just like-
Boylston and Berlin, but as a school district, we took a hit there for those 2
I
years, right?
know, I
Yes.
know.
Yeah, we have a question from our town administrator.
So Kristen is asking how you, Alan, Aaron, how you intend to address the discrepancy.
I don't know. So for fiscal 25,
Is that what she's asking?
I mean, so, I mean, 24 is over and closed. I don't think there's any ability. You know, I guess I would ask the towns in a way, like what, you know, are there any options on the table for us to consider that? Whether, you know, we could reassess that bond amount. I understand your town meetings have happened and that's was cooked into kind of your total budget calculation. So I have a lot of, you know, I guess I have empathy for that and I have understanding of how that kind of ended up.
Yeah.
But I guess I would also say that, you know, the bond isn't an obligation of, and you guys did a debt exclusion for that, right? And some of that money that is coming from taxpayers is intended to pay that bond.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe that's some conversations we can have. You know, it's hard. I have so many things I'm trying to
Yeah,
dig through
yeah.
right now, and we're still trying to close fiscal 24. But if the towns are open to some of those conversations, about the best way to maybe try and handle that, maybe we can have those.
We'd love to have those conversations,
Again,
right?
we want to be nothing but collaborative in this. We understand that some errors were made and they were on our side. Whether we were here or not, we are now the people in place and that's our role.
Yeah.
So,
But we, in a year that's really tight and there are things that are unsure for us, insurance, negotiations is a huge piece for us as well too. We welcome that conversation between the two towns. So we would ask Kristen, right, how would she like to handle that, right, between both towns? Because certainly, our job, like Aaron and I said earlier, is to try to get as much as we can get to provide for our kids in our district. So it's not just a little piece of money. In fairness, you were given a bill and you paid that bill. But also there was also a bill that was really needed to be paid that we actually, as a school district, had to end up paying it. And I think you can appreciate that as well too.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate development.
It is an unfortunate
event.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. So you didn't include it in the assessment request that we voted? Or,
Yes.
oh, okay, so it wasn't like you just forgot to like send us a letter, pay this. It was,
Yeah.
we didn't get the opportunity
yeah,
to
so I
vote
went
on it.
back to the town warrant and everything in both towns. And it was.
And let's be clear, it was before us, right? So we,
Yeah.
when you're saying us, secondly, we heard from Boylston on Monday, that they actually questioned it, as well too, when it was taking place, because they noticed the difference as well.
They were
But-
told it was correct, so.
So we would love, Kristen to have a conversation and us with Wilson and see if there's any way that we could recoup some of that, because again, in a tight fiscal year, we're not knowing about insurance and special negotiations. Certainly every penny would be helpful to our school district.
Yeah.
We'd be wrong if we didn't say that, right?
Yeah.
Yes. it would be.
Right.
Was this a big piece of the discrepancy that you had seen before of the, between what was the budget and what's?
It's one of multiple, it's one of a couple of things. This is just one that we've discovered, right? That it certainly impacts both communities as well
It's a
too.
big number.
Yeah, it's a big number.
I think a lot of what went on last year was the changing people in place, right? So I mean, you had one person who then handed it off to probably the superintendent for a little while, who then handed off to TMS for a little while. And when I look at sort of the budget documents, there is absolutely no consistency to them. It's clear that one person had one budget document, another person sort of recreated in their own mold, and then a third person recreated. And it's very hard for me to even tie back to what the intent was at any given point. I'm also going to say that three-way split where we have three separate account numbers, there are a number of items. For example, I believe, I can't remember, it might be superintendent travel. It's broken into three pieces. The Berlin piece is missing. Someone cut budgets and said, well, I guess we'll cut superintendent travel or whatever that was. So they cut it out of Berlin, but there's money in Boylston, there's money in Tohoto budget. So it's another reason why it should be one item. So if we're going to cut an item, we know the shared impact of that cut. If you have three completely separate budgets for the central office, you cut one piece of it, and now all of a sudden that sort of, I guess, three-legged stool only has two legs.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just money was cut from Berlin that way, it was cut from Boylston that way. And so it's very hard to come down to, what the original intent was. And I think you had people who didn't understand that three prongs and said, we're gonna cut this because we don't know what it's for. And because it's still sitting in those other two places, it creates an awkward situation.
And let me be very clear, right? So one of the things that I first heard when I first came here is all about this budget and the situation I was in. Everything that we've worked on for the last, months that we've been here has been the focus of that. There's nothing fraudulent that we've seen. It just people that weren't really knowing how to do their job, right? And that's the piece of it, right? You know, the joke is if your curriculum director makes a mistake, you know, you get yourself in trouble, but when your finance person makes a mistake, you get arrested, right? So it's real important to have the right people in the right places. And that was one of the things that I certainly have done. I'm trying to do, being the interim, bringing, you know, Aaron's skill set, right? Really, we brought a new payroll person in, Patty Spongberg, who's doing incredible work cleaning that up. Arnold Cervizo, we hired in his new accounts payable. So we brought some new people in there that were making sure they had the skill set that we need to make sure that we can run our district efficiently and focus my job really on the working of the district and not the financial piece alone.
Yeah, I think you're also bringing up, you know, because of these confusing ways of doing things, it made it hard for the school district to show transparency. Because you have to figure it out to explain it, and if you have it convoluted, it makes it even harder to explain it down the line to the next person.
Let's be clear, we're not going to be convoluted this year, right? That's where that is our goal, to make sure we're clear and not convoluted.
That's why, like, I'm like I said, I'm personally excited about some of the things you're talking about, because you're talking about things that make perfect sense.
Right.
But it's not just us.
Sure.
You know, by the time you're gonna have to go to 2 town meetings and explain to taxpayers. And so if it's confusing in the beginning, it doesn't get unconfused
Sure.
later in the process.
Sure.
And being able to explain this, particularly because you've been showing us what some of your pain points are going to be. You're probably going to have other ones.
Yeah.
And when you can't explain that to the taxpayers, it gets very frustrating to try to pass a budget.
And let's be clear, it's not just our job, right? So our
Yeah.
job is working with the school committee in both towns.
Yeah.
So that you can tell the story as well too, right? So when you're at the stores and the general stores, and you can have these conversations based on this. This is a
Yeah.
public document now, right? We're presenting this here. So you can answer those questions that you're asking and that people are asking of you as
Yeah.
well. too.
Not
Exactly.
bumping into anyone at Big Y on a Sunday in Berlin, or Webster, so.
Yeah, they're
You know.
finding
And,
us.
and,
Don't worry, we don't have to
and
come
that's,
find
we
us.
want
Even the
we
young
want
man,
to
Mary.
prepare
I know
you
you are.
for that eventuality, because we know that happens.
Yeah,
And-
so say, Aaron, from sitting in this seat, the last 2 years were extremely chaotic. But if you go back to fiscal 22,
Mhm.
you might find some clues to things in the district that are not so clear from fiscal 24 numbers.
Yes.
And you probably know that. And then just to clarify, this is looking at the numbers here in this early projection is looking at level services.
Level service, everything there, I'm sorry, I have that note to myself, it's level service at the
And
moment.
to my point about fiscal 22 and 24, do we actually know what level services are? Because we couldn't figure that out last year.
Yeah. so-
Sorry, it's a hard
Yeah.
question. It's late. I don't wanna,
Yeah.
but
It's-
some of these are just rhetorical, just to.
It's level to everything I know.
Okay.
So I want to
Okay.
I want to be clear that we have, last night at the school committee meeting, we adopted the budget that's in the system. It has some quirks to it, as I shared, but it's the closest thing to anything we can kind of come to that's accurate. So this represents level service to that budget. We understand that there may need to be some hard decisions made on this budget. I think as we're inheriting this budget almost halfway through the year with the inability to lay anyone off, cutting that budget would be nothing short of draconian. So the goal was to figure out where we are, take a moment in time, and as we're able to analyze that budget and the needs based on that budget over the next couple months, we will make some adjustments where necessary. If a lot of things come in really positively for us, that's when we might start saying, okay, we have a couple asks, right? We need some social emotional support. You heard it from Assabet. Social emotional has not died down since COVID. The challenges are still there, and all of that COVID money. So my prior district, we hired 4 adjustment counselors and 2 BCBAs during COVID. And when that money went away, it went away, but those needs, it's shocking the level of need that so many kids have, the adjustment challenges.
So Aaron, I want to circle back to that. I think you said vote last night on the budget that's in the system. Have you looked at how that lines up with the PowerPoint presentation that was voted on March 19 by the school committee as the approved budget going forward, because that's what the public has seen,
Yeah.
is that March 19 PowerPoint. So I don't know if that,
Yeah.
I don't know if that lines up with the system. And, you know, that night I
I
pointed
will-
out a
I will-
deficit
I
in
will-
revenue that never got corrected before it was voted. So
I will. The state level, there were some increases to chapter 70. And some benefits. There's definitely some items. I know there's some items in the budget that we currently have unfilled. Just to keep things, you know, where they are. And again, we're gonna look at those items. Are those necessary items? Are they considered level service or are they not?
The other piece though
I think there's room
is a
for some
couple things.
conversation.
So we know that Department of Education was, you know, one of the first thing, I think notifications that when we were still trying to get our feet wet was from the town of Berlin, right? Notifying the Department of Education and saying, hey, listen, something's not right with this budget, right? So, you know, the grace period for them with myself and Aaron has gone away, right? So they're looking for end of the year reports. They're looking for things that they need done now. So that's why we had to move forward, get our budget passed in front of school committee, let the Department of Education know so we can move forward and get the work done that we need to get done.
Sure.
The other piece of that is, and I know we talked about that it's a tight budget, right? And we know that our bills are all paid now. We're as at this point, we're feeling like everything's been paid. Our payroll's caught up as well too. Our intention is no layoffs. Let me be clear about that. That's something we're not even entertaining, and I won't entertain for this year at all. Might be a little different of a tougher conversation next year. And so I'll go back, circling back to that bond. Every penny is going to be real important to us, right? For a school district, because again, intentions are level funding, but there are things I want to see that we don't have in place.
Service.
Level service, sorry about level service, but there are things we need. Sorry, level service, yep. But we really need some things that we need to make our school district better. And so we're going to be coming to you asking for that stuff.
Yeah.
That's level service.
Aaron, you better keep him on a tight leash.
Well, that's my job here, right? For that.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very much. Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. We're happy to meet with
Yeah.
you whenever you need.
thank you.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. If you have any questions, let us know after that. The one piece, I know Kristen's online, we're starting negotiations. It looks like every year, every time we do negotiations, you're supposed to have a representative from towns. The last time when we did negotiations, there was someone from Boylston. So I'll be reaching out to Kristen. I know she's on, looking to help us, or have someone representing Berlin being on that negotiations piece as well too. So my first call would be to Kristen, and then if that doesn't work, someone else being on that as well too.
We did bring it up with Boylston
Yeah.
on Monday, and they did say tag you're it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I think the calls.
I guess they were, they were last time in negotiations as well too.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Very
Good seeing
helpful.
everybody.
Yeah, it's very encouraging.
Good, but that's what we want.
And
Moving forward,
And I know some of you are coming to capital planning next Thursday.
we both
is
will
that
be
the
there.
19th?
There.
Yes, I will be there.
Yeah.
I think we'll have a couple other folks. So I think Dan Ayala.
Yeah, I've heard you-
Lisa, I think I want to make sure we have all the troops there.
Yeah.
Really, I know some of the details, but I want them to be able to answer the detailed questions
Mhm.
for you. So I'd like to make sure they're.
Yeah.
We're not shy to say we're still learning a lot, right? So,
Yeah.
so we're still trying to catch up on things, but we feel like we're in a good spot right now to move.
Mhm.
But
I
again,
know everything about everybody.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where Dan's gonna, or Lisa on the furniture.
That's what's really gonna be having your facilities people.
that's right.
Because that helped last year, even though it was late in the process, when people who were involved with the purchases could explain it. Because again, you keep talking about telling the story. And if you just have a line item, it's very hard to say, why are we paying for this? But when somebody says, this is the pain points we have, and this is,
Correct. And I don't want to be that sort of redundant layer of middle management that provides you value. I want you to be able to go directly to the source and know the answer. Right? So the Dan Ayalas of the world, Lisa Segura, or John Campbell are the people who are really going to know the nooks and crannies details that you might ask. So that's kind of where I think you have the resources, you will have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
Have a great night. Thanks,
Good to
guys.
see you.
Take care.
Have some, we'll, see if there's any update on over Kristen here, and I'm sure she's been still online. Maybe then June can probably give us some updates, where we would, you know, our own fiscal year 24.
We're still working on it.
Okay, and we have to know when we want to do that.
I'm not gonna give any real dates, but our tax that have been submitted to the DOR,
It's good.
and we are hoping, which I haven't talked to Kristen yet about this, but the DOR rep, when we first sent it in, we had like 6 other towns in front of us. So that means we don't know, because depending on how many issues they have or whatever. But our DOR rep did actually pick up our recap sheet today, so I'm hoping that we'll have something from them, you know, either this week or next. And then I can't remember exactly what Kathy said, but then it's gonna take another few weeks to process everything, get it all ready to go, and you know, so we're hoping. January.
And with that also be.
It's hard to say with the holidays coming up, it may take a little bit longer than home.
Does that include the certification for free cash?
No, because the books have to be completely closed for that.
Okay.
So, yeah, because I was gonna throw that out there, is that we don't have a lot of money, and what they're asking for right now is more than what we even have available for free cash at this.
So, let me just be clear for like taxpayers' benefit. We can go ahead and pay what we paid last. We could go like pay the same amount we paid in May. You know, for end of year tax purposes, I'd like to pay real estate taxes in this year. I don't know how many other people look at it like I do, but
It's a little bit longer, because all the information has to be entered before the tax bills are printed, so you get to see what your new balance would be, so that your payments apply to it, so. We're
But
working on it.
but it's an option available if somebody wants to pay the real estate tax. You
Just see
know,
what they paid
we have the
last.
public here, and I want to just
Yeah.
put that out there and explain why you might want to do it, might not want to do it,
And you
whatever.
have to also make sure that you have the name correctly on it, the parcel. They happen to have a copy of their old bill, they put that in there too, just so that they know where to apply it to, because right now we don't have bill numbers.
And that's
Oh,
why
so just
I paid mine, I found the one in May, walked it down with a check, handed the check in last year's May payment to Sergio. He
Yeah.
took a copy of it, handed it back to me.
Okay.
And so now whatever I paid in May, I'm paying in December, and then they'll send me the bill for whatever else I owe after the first.
And it would be
There's
helpful to the
no-
town to
and
get
there's
the
no
revenue.
late penalty.
There's
Right.
no late penalties. They
Sure.
have 30
Okay.
days from the date that the tax bills are actually
So-
issued.
So just to recap, I'll pay the same amount I paid in May. I'll bring in a photocopy of May's bill and leave that check and photocopy here at the office or mail it in, right?
I dropped
mine in the little green box.
Well, the parcel number is on the bill, isn't it?
Yes.
On the check.
Write it on the check. Okay. Okay.
Does
it have
to be the exact amount as the last bill, or can you pay
No.
not more? You can pay
Yeah,
less,
you
but
pay
not
more.
more.
Yeah,
You're
Okay.
not volunteering to pay more, are you?
No, I'm not.
no, but I know what you're asking, you have to go down.
Okay.
But by bringing it up, they at least hand you a copy that it was received by the town, so.
I see. So it's
I'm gonna
useful
give
to,
that my accountant, so she'll
Right.
see this bill and then she'll see the copy,
Okay.
instead of just, here, let me drop it off. I'm sure
Mhm.
that they probably would send you a copy in the mail, like given mail. holiday
Yes.
season.
Yep.
And they're open late on Wednesday, so before your meeting, you can pop on by.
I think this is our last meeting. for the-
Yeah,
Yes,
our next,
I scheduled a meeting for this.
But that's okay. I can find my way in. I have other.
Keep you updated as we progress through it.
Mhm.
We'll make sure we put it out there.
Is there a message on our website that tells people why they haven't gotten a bill? I worry about how we communicate this. There is a,
It's good.
actually, I could look it up.
I know Peg has shared information on social media.
Well, I don't go there, so.
Yeah.
It was also in the, wasn't
Website.
it also in the Newsletter?
It was in the newsletter.
Powder House newsletter. Okay,
Yes, that's
But-
where I saw it.
That's right.
But the thing is that I guess with Code Red, you can sign up for emergencies or you can sign up for just regular information. So if you signed up only for emergencies, that wasn't classified as an emergency, you're not going to get it. I can tell you at the next board meeting, the chiefs will be here and they will discuss Code Red. Obviously, it's a voluntary thing. You know, you don't have to sign up for it. Recommended. You know, to pop your, because I put it down as a text and an email, and I got both with that. And that's what I cut and pasted into the notice to go out to.
so I did check our website and it
Yeah.
has a note on the right-hand column from the treasurer collector. It has everything you all just told me to do is all, there's a nice paragraph here and a phone number. So,
So it did.
The information's out there.
So,
yeah,
it's on Facebook, so we tried to hit
okay.
as many as possible for this communication.
Yeah, okay.
All right,
Thanks. Thanks, June.
so those are the questions I had on that, so anybody else have anything?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll second
Seconded.
it. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye. Thank you, Scott.